This is a reclined figure four stretch. It's a really awesome stretch for your glutes and your inner thigh. When we're going towards this stretch, the main thing we want to concentrate on is the rotation of the hip. So our knee joint only moves in one direction. It doesn't move in other directions, right? When we start to tilt the foot inward towards the body, it's the hip that's rotating. So when we're going towards this figure four stretch, first rotate your hip out, right? And then from there, bend wherever the knee joint will let you go and connect the ankle to your opposite knee. Now, you don't want to crank the other knee back, right? Because that just puts a lot of pressure on the knee joint. Instead, you want to pull the entire shape in towards your body. You can interlace your hands behind the hamstring or the calf to get the stretch. Then take your elbow and let it rest in the inner thigh of the stretching leg. Think of dragging the elbow away from the midline to get into that glute and into the inner thigh, and then just soften the chest. Figure four stretch. This is Peaceful Warrior. The feet in Peaceful Warrior are exactly how they are in Warrior Two. So your front foot's pointing forward, the knees over the ankle. You have that nice deep lunge. Your back foot's pointing slightly in. In Peaceful Warrior, we're reaching forward, and we keep that sensation of reaching, and we reach it up towards the ceiling. It's like you want to touch the ceiling, but at the same time, you're deepening into the front knee. Now, sometimes when we go into Peaceful Warrior, our front knee tends to buckle inwards, right? So continue to push the outer thigh towards the pinky toe side. Another thing to keep in mind in this pose is not dumping into the low back or just draping back. Rather, you're pulling up and out of the pelvis and stretching up. And that's Peaceful Warrior. Extended side angle. So the feet in this pose are exactly how they are in your Warrior Two stance. Your front toes are pointing forward, your back toes are turned slightly in. What's different about this posture is that the tailbone is scooping under, the pubic bone's pulling up towards the heart. The chest is broad and open. Your side bodies are nice and long. There are several arm variations you can do with this pose, depending on what the instructor is going for and what your body's up for, So the more basic variation is this elbow on the knee, propping yourself up and extending the other hand towards the sky. You can even let that hand fall back a little bit to get more opening in your chest. A more difficult variation is to bring the hand on the inside edge of the foot. This is kind of nice if you want to get into your inner thigh. You might push the arm into the inner thigh, and that top arm can come overhead. Now it looks a bit more like an angle, right? From the tips of the finger back to the foot, back to your bottom foot, it looks like an angle. The more traditional variation is to have your bottom hand right outside the foot, and that's killer in the front leg. It's super strong. You try to keep the chest open and stretch the fingers overhead. And that's extended side downward facing dog. So index fingers come parallel, and you're rooting down through the finger pads. You're feeling the entire palm push down to protect the wrists. Then you tuck your toes, lift your knees up, and allow the hips to go up and back. And just observe this shape, right? It's an inverted V shape. From there, you push through the palms and allow the shoulder blades to wing up towards the pinky fingers. So that's quite different than sinking into the shoulders, right? You're actually allowing the shoulder blades to rise up and the inner shoulder blade to drop down. Cool. That protects your shoulder as you're in this inverted shape. So you're pushing through the hands, allowing the shoulder girdles to wing up. And then from there, the tailbone is kind of interesting. You're lifting it up towards the sky, and you're feeling this length in the low back and this deep opening in the hamstrings. If you're newer to yoga, you'll probably feel the hamstrings kind of pulling you under, and you'll feel like you're more in a U type of shape. If that's you, take a soft bend to your knees and then flare the sit bones up, which is just a pretty way to say stick your butt out. Yeah? And then from there, your knees will stay bent as you're pushing through the hands. That's what your down dog looks like. Over time, you might be able to start to lengthen the legs out and keep the tail high. If you do that and it just pulls you back to that U shape, then keep the knees bent to let the tail flare. This is dancer pose. Dancer is a complex balancing posture because it rolls together a lot of chest opening and a really deep back bend and hamstring opening all at once. So to get into dancer pose, root down through your standing leg and stand up nice and tall. Then bend your back knee and pull the heel into the glute. Get a quad stretch. From there, draw the tail slightly down so you feel that quad stretch. Then you want to rotate your hand to the inside edge, right? So the thumb's on the arch side of the foot. From there, extend the lifted arm towards the sky and let the chest open. Draw the shoulder blades together. Start to use your left hamstring, or whichever is the lifted leg, up towards the sky, right? So I'm just lifting with my muscle up. So we're not going forward in this. Rather, we're trying to get high towards the ceiling. Once you reach your max with your lifted leg, kick into your hand. And then from there, just really play with your balance here. Notice your hips want to open towards the side, right? Try to keep the hips pointing forward and the chest shining forward. Dancer pose. This is plank pose. The hands are right under the shoulders, and the hips are aligned with the ribs and the shoulders. You're feeling the low belly knit up and in. So you're being mindful not to drop the hips below the shoulders and not above the shoulders, kind of like that down dog, but instead right in line with the shoulders. Then the quads are drawing up and in. It kind of feels like you're pulling away from the mat. This is plank pose. The hands
From
are
your
right
downward
under the
facing
shoulders,
dog, you come
and
to
the
the
hips
tippy
are
toes,
aligned with the
and then
ribs
you
and the
shift forward.
You're feeling the
and
low belly
align the
knit
shoulders
up and
right
in.
over the
So you're
wrists.
being mindful not to
Be
drop
mindful
the hips
not to
below
let the
the
hips
shoulders
sag,
and not
right?
above the shoulders,
Or to let the
kind of
hips
like
stay
that down
high,
dog,
kind of
but
like
instead
a
right in line with the shoulders.
mini down dog,
Then
right?
the
So
quads are
bring the
drawing
hips
up
right
and
in line with
kind
the
of
ribs,
feels like
and allow the
you're
shoulders and the
pulling
ribs to
away
align
from the mat. This is revolved lunge. Revolved lunge is a very fiery pose. It requires deep core strength, it mobilizes your entire spine, and it stretches all along your hip and your low back. The first thing we want to do when going towards any twist is to lengthen your spine. So if the vertebrae are right on top of each other, it's hard to twist, right? When we create space between the vertebrae, it's easier for the spine to mobilize. So when you get towards this, or you come towards this pose, you'll lengthen up first. Then you'll start to twist, not from the hips, not from the front hip jutting forward, but from the spine. Think of the spine having a spiral staircase of muscle around it, mobilizing it and turning it to the side. So you'll turn to the side using the obliques and the muscles of the spine, and then you'll hook your elbow outside edge of your knee and you'll draw your palms together. From there, you'll pull the belly up and in, push the palms into each other, and use that little bit of leverage to twist even more. Now, some teachers will have you get really deep in here and the spine will be a little more rounded, and that works just fine. Other teachers will have you be broad and open, and that works as well. To make this pose really fiery, you might lift your back knee off the ground. Try your best to keep the weight into the center of your posture, in the middle towards your hips, and then deepen your lunge.